Well, former UKIP leader Nigel Farage says he'll represent the views of 17.4 million Leave voters today when he meets the EU's chief Brexit negotiator Michael Barnier in Brussels later this morning.
Mr Farage, who spent 20 years campaigning for the UK to leave the EU, requested the meeting last year following Mr Barnier's meeting with Remainers Sir Nick Clegg. Oh yes, Sir Nick Clegg now, isn't it?
Sir Nick Clegg, for services to screwing every student in Britain.
Kenneth Clarke and Lord Adonis.
Well, Nigel Farage joins us from Brussels and Lord Adonis joins us in the studio. Shame we haven't got you two together, really. Nigel, good morning to you. Can I congratulate you, first of all, on the best hat I've seen on this programme in quite some time. So, well done on that.
Thank you.
You're about to see Michael Barnier. What are you going to say to him?
Well, what I want to say is this, that I know that Nick Clegg and Lord Adonis and Ken Clarke and Nicola Sturgeon and a never-ending stream of Remoaners have been here, colluding with him, trying to stop Brexit from happening. Also, of course, the government have been here, trying to put together a deal, but something's been forgotten here. The main reason that 17.4 million people stood up against the establishment, not just the British one, but the global establishment, and voted Brexit, is we wanted to take back control of our borders. Immigration had been running at levels that were simply too high. And I don't think anybody has really explained that to Mr Barnier, and I think those 17.4 million deserve to have their voice heard.
How do you know that 17.4 million people voted for Brexit because of immigration?
Well, I've spent 25 years going around the country. I've spoken at 1,500 public meetings. I've dedicated the best part of my adult life to trying to get a referendum and to trying to win it. And let me tell you, that, whilst, of course, people have different reasons for voting Brexit or voting Remain, the key issue, the reason that 2.5 million extra people came out from a general election that had taken place the year before, getting back control of our borders, was what won the referendum for Brexit, and every single piece of polling backs that point up.
OK, Lord, are you Adonis or Adonis?
Adonis.
Adonis.
But I answer to anything. So
you don't mind being an Adonis?
like Nigel Farage, I come from an immigrant family, so you have to get used to pronouncing my name in unusual ways.
Do you think that 17.4 million people voted because they were fed up with immigration?
Well, there are a whole lot of reasons why they voted that way. And, of course, remember, in referendums, people tend to vote against the government.
Yes.
That was clearly a big
Giving
thing.
the government a bloody nose is quite often a reason.
But look, can I just take up Nigel on this business about the establishment? Nigel is the establishment. Yeah. Let's be clear. He is there representing the majority and the policy of the government.
He certainly looks like a member of the establishment in his tweeds and hat today.
I'm amazed he's not in Downing Street today, because the policy of the government is Nigel Farage's policy. Apparently, Mrs May today is going to be appointing a Minister for Hard Brexit. I think he should get on the first Eurostar back to London, because she probably needs him in his cabinet. So none of this business about being an outsider.
Okay.
He is now responsible for the policy of the government, and what he should tell Michel Barnier is how can we do it in a way that does not trash people's jobs and livelihoods.
Here's the problem.
No one voted to become poorer in this referendum.
Here's the problem, Lord Adonis. It's this. You guys lost. I voted Remain. We lost. We lost the argument, lost the referendum. You can't have referendums and then, if you don't like the result, just have another one.
Campaign for
Otherwise,
a better result,
democracy dies. You say you want to overturn Brexit, but you don't want to do it in an undemocratic way. How do you possibly do this without actually doing it in an undemocratic way? Explain to me.
Democracy is not just about one vote and then no votes thereafter. Just as the last election was 2 years after the previous election. My view, which is a very democratic view, is that the people voted to open these negotiations, which Nigel Farage is essentially conducting with Michel Barnier today on leaving the EU.
That's not why people voted.
But
they didn't vote.
But they have not seen. They have not seen the final deal. And when they see the final deal, they should have the say.
This is what you want people. This is what you want people to think they were voting for. They weren't. Nobody was voting to start negotiations.
They didn't
People
know.
were given a very simple premise with the referendum. Do you want to be in or out of the European Union? And this country voted to leave the European Union. It wasn't about starting negotiations.
When they voted 18 months ago, they didn't know what the deal was going to be. There was no deal. All that they knew...
But it wasn't about the detail of the deal, was it?
They're going to know what the detail of the deal is.
It was about the simple premise. Do the details later.
But I'm a Democrat. When people know what the deal is...
Are you a Democrat?
When people know...
Or are you the enemy of democracy?
I'm an absolute Democrat. And when people know what this deal is, then I think it's the people that should have the final say, not Nigel Farage.
The people have
doing deals.
say.
It's not. It shouldn't be Nigel Farage doing deals with Michel Barnier in Brussels that determines how this ends. It should be the people themselves in a referendum when they can see the deal, and then they
They've just had a referendum.
and then they can see whether they
We
like
just
the terms.
voted. Look.
But they do not
Stop
know.
talking for a moment.
Do you know whether we're going to be in the single market and the customs union?
Apparently
do.
not.
idea,
No, the
Piers,
Prime
what's
Minister
gonna
says we're
happen?
not going to be in the
When
single
we
market
do
and the
know,
customs union.
then the people should have
But
the final say.
what you're basically, you're just a bad loser, aren't you?
No, I'm a Democrat.
You're not.
I am a
You're a
Democrat.
bad loser.
When people can see...
You didn't like the result,
when
and you
people
want to
can
have
see-
it. It's like playing a football. I'm an Arsenal fan, right? And we got hammered in the FA Cup yesterday, humiliated. I feel terrible. I would like the game to be replayed,
Yeah.
and I'd like us to win that
Luckily,
game.
politics
By the
is
way,
not
That's not
sport.
how it works.
Piers, people can change their mind. I understand you used to be a great fan of Arsene Wenger's.
I was.
You think it's time for him to move on.
He's
don't
become
you?
a serial loser.
Well, there were a lot of people who actually thought 18 months ago Nigel Farage was quite a plausible figure. Now they realise that what he's talking is complete tripe.
Except
that
he was the
leaving-
winner
of
leaving
the
the
argument,
European
wasn't he?
I don't think. It's a
leaving the
bit like.
European Union will mean that
Let's go back to him. Let's go back to Nigel.
I think they'll take a different.
I actually don't agree with that. I think people that voted Leave do not think Nigel Farage talks complete tripe. I think they basically agree with him, and they're grateful to him for leading the campaign that he led. And I say that as someone that voted Remain. Nigel Farage, just bring you back in here. Apart from the fact you do look like a pillar of the British establishment today because of your choice of garb, respond to Lord Adonis here. You know, my issue with all this, with the Ramonas as they're called now, is just this refusal to accept what was a democratic referendum vote by the British public. I can't get past the fact that if you don't like the result, you just have another one. Just doesn't feel democratic to me.
Well, it's worse than that, isn't it? Because what Lord Adonis has said is that he wants to sabotage Brexit. They're exactly the word that he used. And in doing so, he is treating the democratic process with total and utter contempt. And remember this. Every single leading player on both the Remain and Leave sides said if we vote to leave, we are leaving the European Union, we are leaving the customs union, and we are leaving the single market. It couldn't have been clearer. And in a general election that took place in June of last year, both the Labour and Conservative parties in their manifestos said, leave the customs union, take back control of our borders, and now they're trying to weasel their way out because they can't accept the result. The whole thing's a disgrace, but the good news, the really good news, is the great British public are looking at Clegg, Adonis, Ken Clarke and others, and they're really being turned off by them. All the recent polling shows if there had to be a second referendum, and I pray there isn't, then in fact Leave would win by a much,
let's take that point.
bigger margin.
Let's take that point.
Public opinion
Lord
is
Adonis,
firm.
let's take that point. I've not seen any polls to suggest that anyone's really changed their mind about this.
Can I just say, what Nigel Farage said then is straightforwardly untrue.
Which bit?
That people, when they voted in the referendum 18 months ago, knew that they were leaving the customs
But I remember
union and the
interviewing
single
Nigel
market.
Farage many
That is
times. Well, hang on.
untrue.
I remember. Wait a
In the
minute. Wait a
Conservative
minute.
Party manifesto
Wait a minute.
Before
Wait a
that
minute.
referendum.
Wait a minute.
Let him finish his point.
No, because you
Am I-
can't just spew stuff and not have someone come back to you.
Well, I can hardly get a word in edgeways.
I remember interviewing Nigel Farage on this programme in which he made it very clear that we were leaving the single market and the customs union.
But other politicians did not.
David Cameron's own manifesto in the election before the referendum said that Britain would stay in the single market if we left the European Union. Now, that's a hugely important issue. Millions of jobs depend upon that. And that's why I say, being a Democrat, the people should have the final say on this. Now that Nigel Farage is the establishment, he is in Brussels negotiating this treaty of exit with Michel Barnier. When he agrees the terms, and effectively he's doing this on behalf of Theresa May, because what he says today, Theresa May does tomorrow. That's how the government works at the moment. Then I think the people should have the final say. There's nothing undemocratic about it.
If we have a second referendum,
democracy in action.
like you want, all right, say we buy into what you want to do. We say, OK, forget about the first, we'll have another one, right? And
we're not forgetting about the first one.
Once a deal has been drawn up.
Let's say that Remain win the second referendum, right? Let's say Remain win. Why would the Leave side then not have an absolute equal right to then have a third referendum?
Because the next referendum will be on the deal itself. And if the British people decide that they don't want the deal, and that looking at this coolly and calmly, and I trust the wisdom of the people, that they want to stay in the European Union, do you know what I think will happen? The people will heave a great sigh of relief and say that this issue, which is far down their list of priorities, they're concerned about the NHS, education, jobs. The only reason they've had to vote in this referendum is because David Cameron forced them to. It was, how many demonstrations were there in Trafalgar Square? People saying, we want a referendum on
for a
Where
referendum.
where is the financial? Where is the financial? I'm playing devil's
rapidly.
advocate here a bit, but where is the financial apocalyptic state of this country that we were assured would happen if we voted in the referendum to leave Europe? We were told it would happen immediately. We were told we'd be in a recession.
I
no, but we were told by George Osborne very clearly, if we do the vote...
It was a warning. It was a warning, not a promise.
It would be financial disaster immediately.
Let's be clear, we haven't left the European Union.
But it hasn't happened.
We don't leave for 15 months. So what's going to happen after March 2019 will depend upon the treaty. And that is precisely the thing that I've said the people should have the final say on. When they know whether we're going to be in the customs union, whether we're going to be in the single market...
Did you think we should have joined the euro at the time, when the debate was going on?
Well, I thought then it was premature to think about joining.
You never said we should have supported going to
Not in the mid-1990s, no, which is when it all came about. I thought the policy was the right one, which was to have an opt-in, so that we're not outside. You know, the big mistake of British policy since the war is we've always thought, you know, these French and these Germans, they'll never get their act together. They're all useless, because after all, you know, remember back to the war, we're all sort of living in the past. And that we can therefore opt out. We can't opt out of the modern world. Our biggest trading partners are our major European neighbours.
17.4 million people in this country just opted out of the European Union.
And that is why I am, day in, day out, making the argument that when they see the terms and when they realise that their jobs and livelihoods are going to be at stake, I think they should have the final say, and I trust the wisdom of the British people when they can coolly look at what's on offer.
You don't trust the wisdom of the British people. You think they're completely nuts. You think they made the wrong decision, and you want to have another vote.
Yeah, I'm definitely.
You don't trust them at all.
I do trust them, but I think that they need to see the actual terms. All they had 18 months ago was a lot of blather from Nigel Farage, a lot of stuff about how we, you know, no immigration would be a great thing for the country.
And some promises on the side of buses.
And we promises the 350 million. Do you remember that? We don't hear much about that now.
I don't remember him saying no immigration would be good for the country.
Now that Nigel Farage and his colleagues. Now that Nigel Farage and his colleagues.
Did he ever say no immigration would be good for the country?
Nigel Farage said that he didn't want any net.
You just
migration.
said that no immigration. You said net. Nigel Farage said no immigration. Nigel Farage, have you ever said no immigration will be good for this country?
Can I just say that Lord Adonis is a dishonest, disconnected, twisting little weasel, and if that's what the House of Lords is all about, the next big change is to have a referendum to sack the lot of them. He is being entirely dishonest, disingenuous. He doesn't accept the result. He is part of the global elite, clearly in the pockets of the big multinational businesses. He treats ordinary working men and women in Britain with total and utter contempt, and all I can say is thank God for the common sense of ordinary people who can see straight through him.
OK, well, Lord Adonis, last word to you.
That's a really high level of argument, isn't it? If that is the kind of debate we're having in this country, which is just abuse on the part of Nigel Farage,
like you are in the House of Lords,
rather than engaging in the real issues,
isn't it?
then I say bring on this referendum.
Where we've got to.
Because I think the people will engage in the issues and not just in personal abuse.
OK, well...
anything nice to say about each other?
Oh, I'm glad that he's meeting Michel Barnier because he is effectively Prime Minister. So it's great that he is there and conduct these negotiations.
Quite a nice thing to hear, Nigel Farage.
Why should one of the key figures in the referendum who actually won not meet Michael Barnier?
Oh, it's perfectly appropriate he meets Michel Barnier. As I say, Nigel Farage is effectively Prime Minister at the moment. The policy of the government is his policy. What I think should happen is that our government officials should all go over to Brussels with him and they should agree the treaty in the next month or so, and then we can have a referendum on whether the people think that's the right course for the country.
OK. Well, look, the debate will continue raging. Let us know your thoughts.